Welcome to another session of More to Life Conversations. Today, I'm really pleased to introduce René Barnett. René is a veteran television producer, having produced hundreds of hours of television for US networks and cable channels in America and the UK. Her producing credits include some of the most premier specials series, including Ripley's Believe It or Not, Strange Universe, Places of Mystery, Guinness Book of Records, Prime Time, Conspiracy Theory with Jesse Ventura, and many others. Barnett was managing director of UFO magazine, an internationally circulated periodical from the early to mid-90s, and later joined forces with director Bruce Burgess to form Blue Book Films, their work airing worldwide. In 2005, René produced the theatrical film Bloodline, a documentary investigating into the marriage of Jesus and Mary Magdalene, the secret society known as the Priory of Zion, and the Rennes-le-Château mysteries. The film premiered in the spring of 2008 to sold-out theatres and critical acclaim. 17 years ago, returning to her radio roots, René established and launched Night Vision Radio, a weekly talk show covering history, mystery, and conspiracies. Night Vision will relaunch on a new platform in October 2025. René can currently be found at her dream project, Le Confluence Centre in Cuise, France, at the foot of the world-renowned hilltops of Rennes-le-Château. And it is there that René and I live, which is close to Rennes-le-Château. And both of us probably are here, René, because of just that. For me,
Exactly.
for me, it was because my father-in-law, Henry Lincoln, wrote Holy Blood, Holy Grail, who you know very well, or did know, because sadly he passed away about 3 years ago. So what I would like to start by asking you, René, is what enticed you to this whole mystery?
Oh, goodness. Like so many people uh, in 1982, when the Holy Blood and the Holy Grail, which we shortened to Holy Blood, Holy Grail in the United States as we do everything, uh, I read that book and it really triggered some ideas that I hadn't really quite entertained. And the most amazing one to me at the time was the possibly Mary Magdalene had a different role than what's been portrayed. And of course now we know even the Catholic Church has established that she and made public that she was not a prostitute. That was another woman that in the Bible who was at the well that Jesus drove the demons from. Uh, so what really hit me at the time was, uh, I grew up in a time where it really was, and to some extent it's still true, it really was better to be a boy. The boys were always the elected class president, like you might get elected treasurer or vice president or secretary of the class, but it was always a boy. Um, I remember I went to a small school. I grew up in a small town in Oklahoma, and so my class wasn't huge. And there was this one boy that made pretty good grades. I mean, quite good grades. And he would just get praised to the high heavens like he had done a miracle. But yet there was me and another girl in my class. I'll never forget her because she always made straight A's. But we made better grades than he did, but it wasn't acknowledged because it was like all the praise was heaped on the boys. And it was something that wasn't conscious, even on the receiving end of the short stick. We just accepted it because that's the way it was. Of course, men made more money than women. Uh, I remember a time when women couldn't even buy property on their own or have a credit card on their own. They had to be on their husbands or fathers. I mean, it sounds insane, but unfortunately, there are people in the United States that are trying to put us back in that very place, even campaigning on taking the vote away from women. It's just insane. But I remember when it really was sort of that way, and in 1982, when I read the book, I started thinking, wow, maybe that's not true. Maybe that shouldn't be the way that it is. Maybe Mary Magdalene, in sort of reinstating her to her rightful place, maybe it sort of uplifts us all, if we can recognize that, that was sort of a confabulation or just the whole story about her was pretty much made up, a confection to push that narrative. Women should not be heard in the church and all that stuff they came up with at the Council of Nicaea in, I think, 325 or 326 AD, when they decided that Jesus was divine and that women shouldn't be in the church, and all that. So that was kind of exciting to me, well, very exciting to me, that maybe there was another way to look at things. And so that was the kicker. And then the very first time I came, I had the opportunity to come to Rennes-le-Château was in 2004. And I was working in television already. And I came here to meet up with Michael Bagent, who was one of the authors of Holy Blood, Holy Grail, and went all around. And, people were like really astonished to see him there, because I don't think he spent much time here at all. And so that was really kind of exciting. But again, it was that book, that Henry really was the major part of. Well, Henry was the major part of the Rennes-le-Château story, because that the series Chronicles that he did for the BBC preceded the book, and those are still interesting to watch. Those old chronicles about when he first started becoming aware of this place and the mystery behind it, and he ended up getting hooked on it, like we've all done since then.
Because, of course, in 2005, that's interesting, because I moved here with my husband and Henry in 2006, when he was very ill at the time, actually. So it's interesting that you came just before that. But I think that the programs that came out in the 70s, the chronicles that you mentioned, had an enormous effect. I mean, seriously, they were major. They were televised on BBC Two, and those were the days when there were only two channels in England. Well, three actually, but anyway. And the influence and the response to that was absolutely massive. And in fact, Henry had death threats on him at the time, I remember. Serious death threats by various, I don't know, people who didn't want him to say that. But yes, so you did the program Bloodline, which is a really good title, by the way, and it had amazing response. Do you want to say anything about that, René?
Well, it definitely was the passion project of a lifetime, even now. And the film was released in 2008, and that still is my favorite project of all time. For one reason, when we were working with Michael Bagent, we were actually working on developing a television series that was sort of a hybrid part documentary, part dramatized. And we were working with Fox Studios. Uh, they were giving us a huge budget of 29 million a
Wow.
season. And we were working away on it. Everybody was happy. And we were supposed to start production in maybe a week or two. And then I got a phone call from our executive at Fox Studios, and he said that Gail Berman, who was the president of Fox Studios at the time, had left and that she had gone to Paramount, uh, and that all the projects that were going under her had been shelved, including ours. And I mean, I couldn't even speak. I didn't even really accept it when he first said it because it was such a big deal for us. And not only was that something we were dying to work on, but it was also a huge project and it would have been wonderful for our little production company and all that. And by the way, I can't take credit. Bruce Burgess, who was the director of Bloodline, actually came up with the name Bloodline. So, and it was a good name. It very easy to remember and
Mm.
kind of descriptive. So anyhow, that was when Fox dropped out. You know, Michael Bajent dropped out and said, "I'm never working for American television again," which I didn't blame him. Really, it was a really bad thing. He had been over with us in the States for about 6 months, working on
Mm.
developing this project, and we had really worked hard on it. And anyway, he was really disgusted, and so he left. Um,
Mm.
and so we just said, "Well, what are we going to do?" And I said, "We've got to do it. We've got to do the story anyway. We've got to do this." And I said, "We'll just have to raise the money." So it fell to me to get the money together, and really, piece by piece, we did get some fairly large investments from a couple of people, but mostly, I mean, I was actually uh, running, one day to pick up $1,000 that somebody was either donating or investing, and so that I could hurry up and get to the bank, deposit it, and so that my film crew who was in London would be able to pay for their hotel that night. It was like
Yeah.
that all
Goodness.
the time. It was crazy. Then at the
Yeah.
last minute, I must say, an old friend of mine from elementary school on from my little tiny hometown in Oklahoma came through and gave us, I believe it was like 750,000
Wow.
to finish the film, to finish the post production and everything. And that's how
Wow.
we finally got it done and across the line. But the
So
best
what?
part of that was that the creative part was all on us. We weren't beholden to a studio or advertisers or anything. So it was really all us. And I'm not saying it was perfect, but I think it's a lot better than it would have been had someone, from the business end had their fingers in it. And they just let us,
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
were free, we had free reign.
So here we are now, a few years on. We both live in the same area. How do you think things have progressed, or do you think they've progressed? What do you make of the situation now? Because you and I know that Rennes Chateau now gets an enormous amount of tourists every year coming from all over the world to see if they can dig up treasure and things like that. And the Mary Magdalene thing has taken off enormously. There are plenty of people who say they are reincarnated Mary Magdalene, which is interesting. So, what's your take on it now, Renee?
Well, I think, the research goes on, and I've met some really interesting and very smart people that have sort of taken what's been offered already and then built upon that, or proven or disproven this or that. I don't know that it will ever be, the mystery will ever be completely solved. I think it has less to do with some kind of a tangible treasure than it does to than it has to do with the energy and whatever it is that's here that makes this place different, because it really is. I mean, when I was able to come to France for the first time in 2004, that was really the first time, aside from just going right across the border to Mexico and just across to Canada. That was the first traveling that I'd had the opportunity to do in my whole life. But yet, and I could have seen a lot more places since then, but every single chance I've had to travel, I just come back here. I just keep coming here. And
Yeah.
I,
I don't think you're alone in that, actually.
no,
A
no,
lot of people have moved here, and as you say, it certainly has a particular energy. I'm just wondering, because people watching this may not know the background of the story. So just to say initially, it was because actually it was quite a funny story in a way, strange, because Henry, my father-in-law, was on holiday, a family holiday here in the late 60s, early 70s. And for some holiday reading, he got hold of a book by Desaid that spoke about the mystery. And the mystery was that the priest.
that was probably La Trésor Maudit, or the
Yeah,
accursed treasure.
that's
Yeah.
right. And the story was that this poor priest in an area, which I have to say, when my husband first came here with the family, there was like 16 people living in that village. It was like a quiet backwaters. But the priest found something when he was renovating the church. We don't know exactly what, but he found something, took himself off to Rome, and came back extraordinarily rich. And that's where the story begins. So the question is, what did he find that meant that he suddenly became so very rich? And he built up the village as to what it is now. I mean, there was hardly a road when he lived there, the cure. So that was the start of it. So I just relay that in case people didn't know the background of that. And the whole mysteries come out of it. And that led to Henry and Bagent and Lee doing research. And that took them to this bloodline, Priory of Zion, as you mentioned. And all sorts of things started coming out of the woodwork, as it were. So, and it was extraordinary. If you think back to the early 70s, anyone who would even dare to say such a thing would be ostracized. So, yeah, and the mystery continues, as you say, and people come here almost on a pilgrimage, don't they?
They do.
To
Oh, absolutely, they do. The Cathar story here is a big draw, as well as Mary Magdalene and the Knights Templar, and so on the anniversary, uh, a lot of people get anniversary of the conflagration. The Cathars were a heretical, so-called heretical Christian sect who were prominent in the area, and they were wiped out by the Inquisition, the Roman Church, and
yeah,
the what's sort of called, I don't know whether it really was, I don't think it really was, but they call it sort of the last stand of the Cathars was made at a place called Montsegur,
mm-hmm.
and it's they call it a pog. It's a tall hill, and it's almost straight up. And then there's the fortress, or the place up at the top. where they were living, and then they ended up getting, under siege by the Roman army and marched down the side of the hill and then burned alive in the meadow down below. So on that anniversary, each year, a lot of people come to this area just for that. And
Yeah.
and then of course in July there's St. Mary Magdalene's feast day. A lot of people try to get here for that. Um, and some people like to come over here on October the 13th because of the Knights Templar and them the famous Friday the 13th story. So there's a lot of different elements here. And actually, maybe none of them are true, and maybe they're all true, because there definitely were things going on here. Very unusual place. And one of the things I find most interesting were there were so many different groups here, and they all got along just fine. I mean, we had, we had, different Christian orders. We had the Cathars. We had all different kinds of religions around here, and there was no problem until the Inquisition came along. But I feel like it must have been something, about the energy uh, around here that drew all those different disparate groups to the same location. The old mayor of Rennes-le-Château, Willier, I don't know if you ever met him, but he said the real secret to Rennes-le-Château is not gold or treasure or even documents. It's the telluric energy. And we kind of went like, oh, yeah, that's interesting. But then as time has gone forward, I totally see what he means. Because for one thing, I've been around to many of these sites, and we've taken, equipment to measure the telluric energy, and it's unbelievable. And looking at it, the world telluric map, there's all these little blue lines crossing, showing the telluric energy all over the world. And down here in our area, it's just a blue blob because there's so much they've all crossed over. And so it's scientifically provable that there is something here. And that's, I think that's a big part of the draw,
Yeah,
and
definitely.
conscious.
So here you are now, and you are just opening this new, what do we call it?
It's an event center primarily. It's We wanted a place where people could come and hold different types of presentations. We're scheduling a lot on our own, and where some people could stay, where people could come and research. And we thought it might be fun, for people that were really into the history and the research to stay somewhere, with someone else that's been so involved in it for so many years, but who speaks the language, in other words, not French, although I am learning, but the language
Good
of
luck
the.
with that.
Oh, I know. I must become fluent. I just don't want to. I'm okay and I can get around, but goodness gracious, when people really start having a conversation, I'm
Yeah.
gone. I'm just out the window. I'll take it from here and there.
I resonate with that, Rennie. It's very difficult if you've not learnt it before to
Yeah.
come here. But we struggle on. I think this area is incredibly interesting, and I certainly concur that there is a particular, let's just call it an energy, for want of a better word. And I didn't know actually until quite recently that although it's a tiny little village on top of the hill, Rennes-le-Château, back in time, kings and queens used to visit it, which I
They
think
did.
is and you think how hard that would have been back in
Yeah.
those days. No road, no nothing. Why did they come here? It's that's another mystery, I think. to the area. But
And
because,
a lot of people were still doing that.
yeah,
Highly placed people when Sonyard, the priest was here,
yeah,
which was in the late 1800s to the
yeah,
early 1900s. Uh, in particular, I remember Franz Josef from Austria came when he was king,
mm,
and
yeah,
I somehow managed to open a communication uh, with Karl von Habsburg, who is currently the head of the family. Uh,
right,
it was his father Otto was still alive, so he was like second in line. But I couldn't believe he's actually wrote me back. And my question, I told him what we were doing, that we were doing this documentary down here, uh, and I had a question. I wondered why his grandfather, the king, came here. What was he doing here? What
yeah,
was of interest to him? He wrote me back that his grandfather, the king, was here to study the irrigation methods that the farmers were using here. And
okay,
the king would do that, or wouldn't he send someone that was?
yeah, I know. It's interesting, isn't it?
So why was he really here? And I mean, not to mention all the the old authors that have
Mm,
been inspired, like Jules Verne, who did uh, Journey to the Center of the Earth, inspired by Bugarash. Steven
mm,
Spielberg's Close Encounters of the Third Kind were inspired by Bugarash, and they would have shot the movie here, but it was more expensive, so they ended up going to Wyoming or Montana or wherever that was. And Lewis
mm,
Carroll, Through the Looking Glass, Alice in Wonderland, he used to come here, go to
mm.
that show.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
It's very interesting. So, a question I'd sort of would like to pose to you, because obviously this is my thing. You know, all these seekers, all these people that come here researching, seeking whatever, um, spiritual energies. What effect do you think that has? I mean, putting aside the fascinating stories that we've just touched on now, what do you think it actually helps people find their spirituality, or maybe leads them away from it?
I guess it probably depends on the individual, but
Yeah.
I do think in terms of, wasn't it Henry that used to say there's more than one door? Uh, and I think that those things might be their door, into whatever. I know that, I really admired the Mary Magdalene story, but I was never like one of the hardcore, Magdalene followers, even though some of my very dearest friends are and were. Um, I have the utmost respect for her and a sort of just internal affection for her. When I hear her name, I have a positive feeling. Um, but for some people, and I think women, obviously in particular, who have sort of been, I've seen women that, and I don't want to blast marriage or anything, but women that have been married for a long time and have sort of been living their husband's life. He's the breadwinner, he's the high powered executive, and she's the one that takes care of the home and the kids and this and that. And she might have a job, but it's his is the one that's more important. I'm seeing women that are at that stage of their lives when they're at a point where um, they're able to do a little traveling. The kids are gone and they don't have as many expenses, and so they've got the wherewithal to do some traveling. And I feel like a lot of them are sort of connecting with themselves for the first time. And I think they get there through things like, Mary Magdalene, or maybe, with some people, maybe it's Isis. But I think it could be helpful, especially if it makes you feel better. I'm all about feeling better.
In a way, you're saying that it gives people permission, or women permission. So, Rennie, where do you think things are going now for you?
Well, just doing all kinds of events here at the Confluence. It's been really exciting, and I'm so happy that we've been well received especially by the people that live around me. It's really nice to be accepted and welcomed into the community, and I think people are kind of surprised to find out that we're going to be open all winter long because, as you know, this place shuts down during the winter months. So we've got all kinds of fun things planned. Um, I guess coming up, the next thing, well, we're having our grand opening on the 11th of October. So if
Wow.
anyone happens to be in the area, stop by and we'll give you a nice glass of wine and some little nibbles and meet lots of interesting people who'll be there.
People get hold of you.
Sorry?
Where would people get hold of you, Renee? What would your email or something, if they're interested?
You can email info at La Confluence Center, and center is spelled RE.FR.
Thank you so much